All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the new board member series and uh, for your craziness in signing up for a lunchtime of school finance. But thanks for being here. My name is Kent Cartwright. I'm the deputy director for MASB, and I'm a retired school business official. So while all of this craziness that you are experiencing is all new and scary and crazy, I can say that I have been there and we survived it. And I'm joined here with Brenda Pilgrim. She is one of our lobbyists here and a great asset for MASB. You want to say hi?
Hi, and I'm hopefully will be helpful in navigating all that is finance and school budget right now.
So let's go ahead and get started. And yeah, we're up to 56. So hopefully we'll get some other folks coming in and joining us here. And I just got to figure out how to, there we go. Look at that. All right. So hey, so what is a budget? A budget is more than just a breakdown of how much money we have coming in and how is it going out. It actually is kind of your educational plan. In a school district, you're in some of your board meetings, you're going to set goals and vision and where you want to take the district. And in a well-constructed budget, it is built around that vision and those goals. So it really is, it should be a supporting part of your plan. It shouldn't be, we built the budget, now let's build the plan around it. That's kind of backwards. So it is a living document. This thing is going to change. You already know that. You adopted a budget in June, knowing the one thing you knew about your June budget, it was wrong. And it's going to have to be changed here when the state finally gets its act together and passes a budget. So it is a living document. You have the authority and the ability to change it as things happen in your district, both good and bad, and you need to adjust. And as I mentioned earlier, this document, this budget shows what you prioritize in education. You've heard the saying before, follow the money. Hey, you can see that in a school district. What do they really believe is important? You look in where they spend the money. And so if you're, and people do look at your budgets that way. And then the last piece here is it is an instrument for you to show your constituents that you are meeting your fiduciary responsibility, that you are taking the scarce resources that they provide you and that they, willingly, somewhat willingly, allow you to work with. And your job is to turn that into the most benefit, the most service possible for your school district. And so your vision and your budget kind of walk hand in hand. And if you tell your community, hey, we believe that, say, this year our goal is to focus on 8th grade reading, you should have a budget that supports, or you can point to in the budget how you're supporting that goal or that vision. And if you have your vision and your budget interlocked, that allows everybody to have a common focus and everybody knows the direction that you're heading. And again, where you want your district to go, you should be able to look in your budget and say, yes, see, we are supporting those things that we believe are important.
Ideally, when the budget is done, the state budget, in January, we start with the revenue consensus, which is a group of people from specialists from all over the state. They can be in the universities, they can be from the government, state government, and they come up with an idea of what state funding will look like as far as taxes and revenues and what will be coming in. That gives March and April, the districts develops their budget assumptions. Now, this is an assumption dealing with the forecast, staffing, and pupil count. in June, the districts finalize the budget and hold budget hearings. In June 30th, mandatory budget adoption date. It is mandatory, it is in law, but there's no teeth to it to make it enforceable, which is what we're going through right now. In September and October, there are budget revisions and assumptions that become known. Since we don't know what the actual numbers will be from the revenue consensus conference, that gives us the opportunity to really work with real numbers. In November, there's an audit of the report for the prior year. And there's a budget revision if necessary in January and February. So they can revisit numbers and make sure that everything remains balanced and that we're not over budget. And then in June, there's the final budget revision of what was actually spent. Funding sources. There are several, but I'm going to talk about the revenue as far as the state funds are concerned. And that is the foundation allowance, which is what we look at as the per pupil, which all of us are very focused on. And then on top of that, there are categorical grants. Some of these are competitive, some of them are not. You may know some of the categoricals is 31A, which is the one that we use for at-risk, that took the biggest hit in the last budget go round. But there are other grants that affect different districts differently. So that's what are the two main funding sources that as school boards you would be looking at.
So let's
State
talk.
Oh, go ahead. No.
We set? Okay. So let's talk about the foundation allowance and the drivers behind this. And the foundation allowance is your largest source of funding, but you don't control how much that's going to be. That's determined by the state's budget. And that's the thing that we're waiting on right now. But your foundation allowance is based upon your ability to pass an 18 mil on non-homestead property tax. And the way the formula works is you take your number of pupils times the foundation allowance, as you see up there in the formula up in blue. But the Paul Harvey rest of the story is that the state calculates the value of 18 mils on your non-homestead property values, and it subtracts that amount from the formula and sends you the difference. Okay, so to get your full foundation allowance, it's a mix of money directly from Lansing and money coming from your area, from your taxpayers. And of course, if you look at the formula there, the number of pupils, that is an important part of your calculation. It is a weighted average. We actually take pupil counts 3 times a year, but only 2 of them matter for money. And that's the fall count and the spring count. And there's a weighted average in a formula that gives you what's called your average pupil count for the foundation allowance formula.
Federally, the federal revenue only makes up about 6% of the budget. It is relatively small. The things that we see from federal funding are the title funds, Title I through 9. And out of those, there are 2 programs that are that take up most of the federal funding. One is Title I, and that targets disadvantaged students. That's economics, and there are a lot of schools that receive Title I. And then the other is very important, which is the Disability Act, which supports students with disabilities. Those are the biggest pots of money within this. There are also dollars educated for teacher development, English language learners, different after school programs, things along that nature.
Oh, well, that slide doesn't look very good. My apologies.
There's numbers missing, Ken.
Yeah, they're all jumbled up here. I'm not sure I can fix this on the fly. My apologies. Larissa, do we have this posted anywhere, or can we post this?
Yeah, we'll send out the slides after so we can fix it before it gets sent out.
Yeah, my apologies. The biggest thing here to note, general fund revenue. Okay, so this is your school budget. And this picture is all districts in the state of Michigan from mischooldata.org. And the thing that you want to note here is this blue section, this big blue section, that is your foundation, that is your foundation allowance, combined with this orange section, which, I'm sorry, the orange section is the foundation allowance. The blue is your 18 mills on non-homestead property. So it's the orange and the blue together that make up your foundation allowance. And then after that, the gray area, these are categoricals. And then you can see federal make up 10%, and then local and other, make up about 9%. And your question may be, what's that local and other? It's everything from interest from your bank accounts to ticket sales from your Friday night football games. That's all what's thrown in that 9%. So let's talk about where we spend our money, or where you spend your money. Again, this is a statewide picture from 23-24. Why do we use 23-24? It's because that is the most recent audited data at the state levels. And notice here that we are a people business, and in that business, most of our money is spent on people. So salaries and fringe benefits, they make up 76% of all of your expenditures. And why this is important is because if you have a significant shortfall in your budget, it is very difficult to fix that shortfall without impacting people. And impacting people in a small community or in any community, that's hard. That makes your job very, very hard, because those people that you're impacting, that you're thinking about, can I keep them employed or not keep them employed during this time of budget cuts? They're your neighbors, they're your friends, they're your kids' friends, things like that. And that makes it very, very difficult. Purchase services, these are things like, hey, if you need to have a plumber or an electrician, or maybe you need a mental health specialist who's not on staff, it could be, a lot of a service where you receive a service instead of a good. That makes about 13% of your budget. Capital outlay, those are your major expenses like roofs and roads and parking lots. Those are about 3%. And then all other make up about 3% also. So as you can see here, salaries and benefits, about 76%. Now, you may look at your budget and say, well, we're not 76%. On a district by district basis, I have seen the range anywhere from 70% to 95%. So kind of think about that there, and the challenge if you were in the 95% category. If you're there, your opportunities are limited when you come to trimming. So why is it so expensive? And why is there such a variation from 70% to 95%? And it kind of depends on your bargaining agreements, and it depends on the longevity of your staff. Okay, so if we take a look here at your salary, the statewide average, and this was 23-24, I believe. On average, a new teacher just out of college costs, salary-wise only, about $40,000. But in addition to that, the district has to pay into the retirement system about 26% of the salary. They have to pay into federal Social Security and Medicare. That's another 7.65%. And then most districts are providing health insurance. And if we simply assume that They're, you know, the conservative approach is what's the most expensive? That's full family. There are some caps and some limits, but let's say for your district, it's right around a little over $20,000. So you can quickly see here that that brand new, just out of college, $40,000 teacher is actually costing for your budget about $73,640, right? So if we go to the state average at 62,000, so this was that $62,000 teacher, that teacher is probably got a master's degree and has been in your district about 5 or 6 years. That's about what you're looking at for the average teacher here in the state of Michigan. That average teacher runs total cost about $103,000. And then if you have your top end folks, these are folks who have been in your district for 25 years. They may have a master's plus 30, or they may have a net specialist degree or even a doctorate. And they're at about $95,000 for salary, but full cost for your budget's just shy of $150,000. And so as you look at this, you know, one of the tricks of the trade that I learned was every time that you unfortunately had a great teacher retire, they often were at this top end. It was a budget opportunity because you're going to replace them with a teacher about half their cost. And of course, this is an opportunity that has a cost, and that is you're trading a very seasoned teacher who has figured it out and knows how to work with kids and knows how to provide effective instruction with somebody who's new. And so just keep that in the back of your mind. So capital expenses, as you're looking at your budget, you just got to keep in the back of your head, you've got two different types of capital expenses. One of them are the reoccurring costs. You know, these are how do I keep rain off Susie kindergartner's head? You got to keep that roof up. How do I keep the potholes in my parking lot smaller than the state's potholes? You got to put pavement in. HVAC, that's your heating and air conditioning system. And then you have equipment costs. You know, you have weight rooms and band instruments and computer labs. So it's not a ginormous part of your budget, but it is a very important part so that you can keep up with with your infrastructure needs. And then your budget has so much more. And these are just examples, everything from teaching supplies. You know, I like to refer to that as, you know, the crayons and the edible paste, to textbooks, you know, library books, you got attorney fees, you got transportation, your busing costs, you know, and that's a huge variable cost. You've got districts up in the Upper Peninsula that they have kids, believe it or not, their districts are so large that the kids who are bused can be on that bus for up to 2 hours. That's how ginormous those routes are. And then we have, you know, districts that are suburban or city-based, and their routes may be, you know, 20, 30, 40 minutes. So lots of variation there, but you can see there's a whole lot that goes into your budget. Yes, 2 hours, Glenda. 2 hours on a bus. All right, why is this not playing nice again? There we go. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is fund balance, because you can't talk about a budget without fund balance, it seems. So the first one here is a couple ways of looking at your fund balance. Now, technically, it is a running total of every year's net income and net loss added together since the day that your district started. So I was up in Petoskey. That district started in like in the 1880s, 1860s. And you add up all the wins and losses, the income and the net loss since that time through today, and that actually would come up to your fund balance. But a more useful is to look at it as an informal scorecard, all right? In the years that you're able to add a little bit to the fund balance, those can be wins. and years that you use fund balance, those can be losses. But even there, I hesitate because it is acceptable and permissible to use fund balance if you do so in a responsible manner. You may have very good reasons to spend on fund balance that are totally legit. The challenge that that you want to watch for is you're looking to avoid unexpected spend down of your fund balance. That's what you're trying to avoid. Why do you need it? Well, many of us are borrowing for cash flow purposes, and we're doing that on an annual basis. And why is that? Well, because as you're getting ready to start the school year right now, you're hiring new staff, you're bringing your teachers in, your custodians are working long hours, your bus drivers are getting ready to start getting paid again. So for school districts, the expensive months are, starting in August and going through the fall. But our cash is our income, our cash coming in is a combination of property taxes, which come in January and July, and the state monies, which start in October and in August. So you can see there's this imbalance between cash going in and cash going out. So some districts have to borrow to cover that shortfall in order to meet payroll. It protects you from uncertainties like having a roof leak in the middle of the year. And you say, oh, that never happens. Yeah, it happens. Even in the best of districts, you can have weird stuff happen. You're required to have a fund balance. If you go below 5%, there are actually things out there that trigger some required training, and if you go even further below that, you can get put on a deficit district list. So there are some a little bit of teeth, not a whole lot, but there are a little bit of teeth if your fund balance gets too low. It protects you from millage reductions and something called Headley reductions, and that we're not going to go in depth into what a Headley reduction is. This is where I get to shill. In CBA 103, we talk about those in depth. So come join us at annual conference or whatever we show that. We do talk about what that is and how you avoid it or how you offset it. But what you need to know is that sometimes that 18 mills in non-homestead property can be eroded away, and the state doesn't make you whole. If that 18 mills gets eroded to something like 17 mills because of this Headley, the state still assumes you collect the 18 mills. And so in essence, you cannot collect your full foundation allowance. And then last but not least, something to fall back on when the unexpected occurs, like you don't have a budget. And that's kind of what we're facing right now. All right. So then, folks, one of the biggest questions I get asked, well, what's the right amount of fund balance to have? And I'm not going to give you an answer. I'm going to give you a menu. And you're going to have to go down here and look at these and try and figure out what works best for your district. The real answer is, what will your community tolerate, or what will your community support? So you've got this percent of expenditure method, which is say 2 to 3 months of expenses as a rule of thumb. ASBO, which is the National Association of School Business Officials, and our Michigan Association of School Business Officials, along with many of the auditor firms in Michigan, they recommend between 10 and 18% for Michigan school districts. And you can see that for a district, in our example, District A with $37.5 million in expenditures, there's a big difference between what the recommended fund balance should be on these 2 points. The third bullet here, the annual low cash point. This is actually the method I used in Petoskey. We knew that if we could keep our fund balance above, at the time it was $2.1 or $2.2 million, we didn't have to borrow. And that was attractive to our board and to our community. Credit rating agencies, they want to see at least 5%. Another example, District A's 5-year low point, use that. There are many different ways to come up, but again, it really comes down to what were your community tolerating.
School aid revenue sources. This is a big deal as we go into the budget and as we look at things legislatively. What you'll see there is the largest chunk comes from what we're receiving is sales tax at 43%, and then second, the income tax at 22%. There's a state education tax. The lottery also does not, while is funding, does not cover the cost of education in Michigan, which is only at 7%. And then you have gaming and betting and other things of that nature. That's why it's so important when you hear from us when we're looking at legislation that you think doesn't really involve schools, really does, because changes to any kind of tax base that is listed here can have a far-reaching effect into into your budget and into the per pupil funding.
So this is a fun little history lesson. And what this is showing is the dollar increase or decrease to the foundation allowance since this method of funding schools in Michigan started back in 1994. And you can see that in most years, the increase has been at least above zero. But there have been times where it's been zero, or if you were around in fiscal year 2012, there was a big hit that year. And the Paul Harvey rest of the story is that loss, that reduction of foundation allowance by $470 per pupil, that actually did not happen until January of that school year. And so school had already been in session almost half a year before the districts were handed, oh, here's a $470 cut. So, and if you look at the history there, this is the recession. This is the Great Recession, the impact of the Great Recession in Michigan. We managed, while the Great Recession happened in 07 and 08, when the housing bubble burst and all that good history stuff, the state had some reserves and they were able to kind of last it out until fiscal year 2010, 2011, and then in 2012. Now, more recent here, you can see that, we had a good year in 22, pretty decent year in 23, but in 24, it was pretty flat. So, yeah, interesting from a history viewpoint. I guess on the positive side, for the most part, the state has been able to kick us a little bit of money in most of the years. But there are years when the saying is when the nation's economy catches, a sniffle, Michigan gets a cold. For us, it's when the auto industry, also in Michigan, when the auto industry has a sniffle, Michigan's economy catches a cold. So those are the things that I pay attention to when I'm watching the paper and thinking about budgets. So Proposal A, again, I mentioned earlier, it was put into place in 1994, and its idea was to create some level of equity in school funding. And it has achieved, it actually had 5 goals, and it has arguably achieved all 5 goals. And when we say equity in funding, it was trying to establish a baseline that all districts would be at. And I think it was in 2022, we finally achieved that. And now that target foundation, that base foundation is 9608. Now, Proposal A was a political compromise back in 1994. And as part of that compromise, the legislators had to figure out how to address districts that at that time were enjoying some very significant revenue on a per pupil basis that was higher than most of everybody else. And they were that way because of the characteristics of their district. Maybe they had a GM plant in the backyard. Maybe their voters were very happy to continue to pay high taxes to support their schools. But for whatever reason, there were a handful of districts that were receiving significantly more funding, and the legislation couldn't pass if the legislators didn't address that. So they did that through two little carve-outs. And the one is districts that are considered hold harmless districts. And those districts, there was 24 of them, and they were allowed to levy additional millage in order to maintain their standard of living, essentially, is how to think of that. And those 24 districts, I think that number has decreased since then. If you give up your hold harmless designation, or you can't recover it. So, and then there were 46 districts that were considered out of formula. And so think about that 18 mills. An out of formula district is a district who its 18 mills raises all of the foundation allowance. Or in some cases, in a district that real close to Petoskey, there just north of it, that district only needed to levy 13 mills in order to get its foundation allowance in most years. And those were called out of formula districts. And again, there are most of them are still out there.
Other state funding, and you'll become more familiar with this as you go through the budgeting process, but you'll hear the term categorical and you'll hear the term programming. Categoricals are basically a line item within the school budget, and they cover different things. It is, I can't even begin to guess how many categoricals there are. Probably 6 or 7 pages of them just for education. You'll again find ones that come up regularly. At-risk categorical is 31A, and then the school lunch program categorical is 31B. Some of these grants and these categoricals and programs are non-competitive. You will receive them per population of your students in need, and others you may have to apply for and go through a competitive process through the Department of Education, Michigan Department of Education, to receive that funding. You'll also find state funding and report monthly in the state aid report that is also accessible, so that you know if there are any changes or if there are any modifications that you may have to make. Oh, the budget process. This is technically how it works. It's not working like this right now, but technically this is how it works. Again, we talk about the Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference, which is held in January. That is the first one. It's important as we look into the future of what we think the state revenues will be. And it takes into account possible growth, possible changes in business, purchasing, any windfalls that may happen, anything along those lines that the bright and informed can educate us on. And that's done in January. Once that's done, we have some rough numbers, and the governor usually proposes her budget in February. So when she does the state of the state address, the budget is usually talked about during that. After that, the House, Senate, and subcommittees hold hearings. So the Education Committee, Transportation, so on and so forth, they will all hold hearings and decide how they would like to spend their dollars, tax dollars in future. Once that's done, that is sent to the entire House or Senate, whichever side, upper or lower house, and they will decide if the version that they have put forward is doable, and there will be a vote. Once that vote is taken, that usually happens in late spring. Then again, there is a consensus revenue forecasting conference again in May. so that we can see what the numbers look like. A lot of things can change between January and May. Once all this is done and we have the actual numbers of what we're expecting, and we have both the budgets coming out of the House and the Senate, the conference committees hammer out an agreement that both the House and state budgets can be approved by the chambers, and that usually happens in early summer. It can go relatively smoothly, it can go quickly, or it can be a lot of negotiation. In 2019, as we were talking about, there was a law signed that says the budget must be completed by July 1st. There is a law, but again, there are no teeth to it to really enforce it and make it happen. Once the budget is sent to the governor for her signature, she has a line item veto. So she can actually go through the budget and line out specific items, not the entire budget, but just specific items. And she can veto those out of the budget. So you will hear about line item vetoes. And there was a lot of that going on in not this last budget, but the budget before. You will hear about supplemental budgets, and that happened in the last budget cycle, where there may be things that are missing, or there may be funding that is available that they didn't think was available. So they are able to make adjustments to and changes to revenue. With that, that offers the opportunity for schools, for education, for all of the departments actually, to ask for additional dollars, which would be a supplemental budget on top of whatever the regular budget would be. There are a lot of threats to school funding, and right now you've been hearing a lot about roads, you've been hearing a lot about higher ed and so forth. The school fund can be under threat just simply from the things that we talked about before, as far as changes in law, as far as taxes, as far as property taxes. An example would be last session that they wanted to remove homeowner taxes from veterans, which is fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, that has a far-reaching effect into the school budget. So you will hear from Jennifer and I on occasions where we're worried about a specific tax or changes to a tax, because that does affect the school budgets. There are other challenges that happen. There are things that are fed into the school aid fund. One of those things would be higher education. We understand community colleges are a key part right now of K-12 education, just simply because there are children who are registering to take classes at community colleges so they can get the double credits and so forth. And we understand that. But what we're looking at right now is four-year universities and how that funding is going to affect us. It can go into the millions of dollars, and that is an ongoing issue that we are fighting. Any kind of changes in tax policy, specifically going to roads again, is that they want to take the gas tax and put that all into roads, which we all agree with. But what people don't understand is about $170 million of that tax actually goes into the school budget. So there are lots of threats going on that we are aware of, and you have to really look at it in a wider swath. There are small changes that can have a big effect on the school budget. And that's what, as lobbyists, we track to make sure that we are ahead of and know what is coming. Other revenue factors. We have the federal grants, we have IDEAs, we have special millages, enhanced millages, bonds and sinking funds. When looking at federal grants, this again goes back to what we're looking at from the Department of was managed by the Department of Education, which would be title funds. Again, Title I, being a big component, or anything that has to do with disabilities. Those numbers can change, and those are beyond our control. And right now, another budget impasse is in place, so we don't know what those numbers will look like. Special millages and enhanced millages go on often, and during this last go round of the cycle, 50% of them, I believe, failed. But 50 of them succeeded. So there are varied income streams that we have to remain conscious of, but are beyond our immediate control.
All right, so I've been trying to answer questions in the chat. But if you come out of this, let's say you're walking the dog tonight and you're like, man, I wish I asked this question. Brenda is a great resource as our Assistant Director of Government Relations. She's been a great addition to the team and is doing a yeoman's job in covering down for Jen Smith as she's out. You can reach out to Larissa. She is our Assistant Director of Marketing, or you can reach out to myself, and yeah, we'll do our best to help you out. And then, hey, we went through in about 48 minutes here a school finance presentation that probably has generated more questions than answers for many of you. And as a new board member, you're probably feeling like you're drinking from the fire hose when it comes to the finance stuff. We get it. We're here to try and help you out. And as Larissa put the link in the chat, we have a whole finance series because we do know you got to break it up into chunks in order for it to be digestible. And the other cool thing about finance is it's the topic that keeps on giving because it's always changing. And so just because you had, a basic look at it this year, in 3 years, you may, or 4 years or 5 years, you may want to come back and retouch it because it is always changing. And Brenda, I say I owe you another apology for a typo in your name. My apologies. So.
That's okay. People can find me.
All right. Again, I don't see any new questions in the chat. So, Larissa, you got any words of wisdom?
Unfortunately, I know nothing about finance, so can't help there. Our next new board member session is September 9th on school safety.
All righty, folks. Hey, thanks for doing what you do, being a board member. It can be a tough job. My hat's off to you. I have nothing but respect. And what's cool about this is that we all want the same thing, which is what's best for kids. So hopefully we'll see you at other MASB events and presentations. Good luck. Don't be shy. You got our email addresses, and we're here for you. So have a great.
Also, if you have, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I wanted to say that if you have not registered, if you're not registered from News from the Capitol, which is the newsletter we send out every Friday, there is not a lot going on right now, and you may not receive anything. But as soon as anything budget-wise breaks, that will be one of the best avenues to know exactly what's going on, what the bills look like, and any kind of links we can connect you to as far as the budget and what we're looking at. Keep your eye out. This may not be until late September, but we will do our best to keep you in the loop and let you know what's coming down the pipe.